Capitalism is killing drug addicts, and this isn't just a pseudo-intellectual quoting of Malcolm Marx and a display of intellectual prowess. It's a factual statement. In a capitalist society, every service, every object is monetized, including treatment for terminal illness such as substance abuse disorder. From rampant healthcare fraud and special interests manufacturing the problem, solution, and antidote, corruption has touched and impacted how and why of treating substance use disorder in America. You pay taxes, right? Sure, everyone does. There's nothing in life that's guaranteed except death and taxes. And you know how much of your money not only gets squandered in the usual manner that our money does get squandered in taxes, but gets stolen from us by healthcare professionals each year? Now, granted, they don't pay doctors and CEOs of treatment facilities anything near approaching a living wage. And if a man happens to steal because he's starving, can it really be called theft? However, it's time we had a discussion exactly about how corruption affects our treatment of substance use in this country. Our nation's drug and alcohol problem is a manufactured crisis. The manner in which this problem affects the American people is akin to theft. The span and the scope of our drug epidemic could be stopped if it wasn't being utilized to generate income. Our nation's drug addict problem is a manufactured crisis. According to the CIA in a declassified file made available by the Freedom of Information Act, CIA was actually a precipitating factor method of distribution of crack cocaine and its distribution on domestic soil immediately following the Iran-Contra affair. It's so encouraging that as we grow, we learn, and we learn from our mistakes and vow to do better, right? Right. How do we account for the tons and tons of fentanyl that account for domestic use each year? After all, synthesizing fentanyl from scratch requires pharmaceutical-grade laboratory with pharmaceutical-grade equipment, utilizing pharmaceutical knowledge. So damn those homeless people for not being able to afford apartments, but being able to afford these clandestine labs to synthesize all this fentanyl. Do you know that the first step in the process of synthesizing fentanyl from scratch involves some pretty nifty equipment? According to the National Library of Medicine, and I quote, the first step in synthesis utilizes a Bucci R200 rotary evaporator. Now, a Bucci rotary evaporator, model R200, with a 60-gallon capacity, you're looking at a $64,000 piece of equipment. I'm never giving $1 to a homeless person again. Just sell me your Bucci rotary evaporator. Put a down payment on a house. If we're not synthesizing these mind-destroying drugs on our own, how are they getting into our country? It's kind of an irrelevant question. Never mind how are they getting into our country, why aren't we stopping it? If only we had the ability to stop this epidemic from ever touching our soil, right? Well, according to Travel and Leisure in an article dated May 19, 2017, to date, ever since September 11th, 2001, the TSA has confiscated more than 975 million ounces of shampoo. Anything over 4 ounces violates our current policy. Now, the TSA is a crack team dedicated to ensure the safety of the American public. I wish they'd do something about the fentanyl and carfentanil coming into our country, but priorities, right? The way in which this problem affects the American people is tantamount to theft on a large scale. You know how much of your tax dollars went into funding substance abuse treatment in recent years? Well, according to SAMHSA, the president's budget for fiscal year 2024 includes $10.8 billion for the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Administration, $3.3 billion over the budget's the agency's 2023 budget. 2024 budget continues to support the president's unity agenda to address the national mental health crisis and overdose epidemic. With more funding, facilities are able to serve a larger patient population. After all, no money means no mission. According to Justice.gov, in 2020, a task force that includes the DEA, the DOJ, the FBI, and the Department of Health and Human Services completed a national enforcement action that involved 354 charged defendants across 51 federal districts, including more than 100 doctors, nurses, and other licensed medical professionals. These defendants have been charged with submitting more than $6 billion in false and fraudulent claims to federal health care programs and private insurers. If this much fraud was being perpetrated, how much do you think didn't get caught? The span and scope of our drug epidemic could be stopped if our lives weren't being juiced to run the wheels of commerce. What's one way to guarantee you have a steady supply of addicts to treat? you wouldn't intentionally put a mind-destroying substance on the street now, would you? A brief look will demonstrate that the introduction of canthiones, such as alpha-PPP, which is flocka, and mephedrone, which is bath salts, have been introduced to the domestic methamphetamine supply and are a huge precipitating factor in not only the rise in amphetamine psychosis-related incidents, but also the rise of dual diagnosis treatment centers designed to serve the needs of these American citizens that have had permanent psychiatric damage sustained while using substances. On March 23, 2023, 4,000 pounds of methamphetamine was confiscated in a house in Garden Grove, and this is according to the OC Register. The troubling part of this bust was not the large amount of methamphetamine, nor the purity, which, according to the DEA analysis, was 99.7% pure. The troubling part is 100 gallons of alpha-PPP found at the scene. The effort to produce bath salts and flocka, as opposed to good old P2P bathtub crank, is about 50 times more. The likelihood of sending somebody into amphetamine psychosis as a result of consuming bath salts and flocka is also higher, as stated by the National Library of Medicine. According to a study by multiple scientists of Science Direct, not only are research canthiones more likely to produce permanent negative effects, their use is also on the rise. A manufactured problem that is being profited off of is a cancer that is inflicted onto our society. Not the person who live it touched, but the cold blood calculation that made the current state of things a reality. This is not an organic epidemic that we are dealing with. They're stealing in more ways than one from us, and it could be stopped if it wasn't making them even more money aside from the theft. Corruption has a huge impact on the way we treat addiction in America. And whether you know someone who's struggling with a disease, or you've ever had your car broken into so somebody could get a gram that night, or if you're struggling to portion out your paycheck to take care of your material needs, this problem affects you. It's time that this information was not only outlined but delivered to the people. You complain loudly enough about a problem and someone is going to come to grease the wheel eventually.